It's 8 o'clock. This is the UK Tonight. Coming up, it has smashed his legacy. After dozens of women come forward to share their allegations of abuse at the hands of Mohamed al Fayed, tonight we hear Cheska's story.
Amazingly, a lot of women, as you know, have been extremely brave to finally tell their story. It's just a shame that he is not here to face these allegations.
Cheska tells me about her frustration that his alleged behaviour went unchecked and unchallenged for so long. As her lawyer says, they've had another 100 inquiries since a documentary about him aired just last week. We'll bring you that full interview in a moment. Also ahead, swathes of the country still under an amber weather warning tonight as a month's worth of rain has fallen in some areas. AFC Wimbledon has had to cancel its cup tie with Newcastle after a massive sinkhole appeared on the pitch. We'll have an update from the fan behind a new Just Giving page for the club. Plus, as the NHS starts its new vaccination campaign, we'll hear from one of the nearly 2 million people believed to be living with long COVID in the UK, former GB rower Una Cousins. And why a train company has banned its passengers from using dating apps on board. All that to come and much more on the UK Tonight. He's a man described as a monster who is alleged to have abused dozens of women and his power for years as the owner of the world's most famous department store. 37 women have come forward to describe the sexual abuse they say they suffered at the hands of Mohamed al Fayed and a systemic failure to protect them. Tonight, we want to bring you Cheska's story. Cheska was just 19 years old when she started working at Harrods. This is what she told me when we spoke a little earlier, alongside her lawyer, Maria Muller, from Justice for Harrods Survivors.
Primarily, it had been a frustration that his behaviour had gone largely unchecked for so long. As you say, I worked there 30 years ago, and there have been numerous occasions where myself and other women have tried to speak up, and we've been shut down. And the opportunity came to speak on a dispatches programme, but it became apparent quite quickly they needed somebody to waive anonymity in order to give the programme more weight, with a hope to it being aired. And so I agreed to do so. It was not something I considered doing quickly or lightly. It was a big decision. But it did mean that the programme was aired, and there was press coverage for it. The trouble was, after that, it felt like it largely sank without a trace. Unbeknownst to me, obviously, people were coming forward to the police, which was great, but no one else was coming forward publicly. And I very much felt like I'd become the sort of poster child for this. Obviously, we're here now because the big documentary has aired.
And more women have come forward.
Amazingly, a lot of women, as you know, have been extremely brave to finally tell their story. It's just a shame that he is not here to face these allegations.
Back in 2018, when you went public the first time around, Mohamed al Fayed was still alive.
Yes.
And you felt that nothing happened as a result of that original TV investigation. We have since found out that in between then and now, 2018 to 2024, the CPS had twice failed to bring charges against Mohamed al Fayed for sexual abuse as far back as 2008.
Yeah.
He was accused of indecent assault against a 15-year-old girl. A spokesperson for the CPS said, "We must be confident there is a realistic prospect of conviction." And in these cases, they felt it was not. How do you feel today? Because obviously a lot of people will have watched the documentary over recent days and think of you in terms of what kind of justice can you get now? Because he is not around to answer for his crimes, to pay for his crimes, alleged crimes.
I think it gives everyone a sense of closure. It smashes his legacy, this as well, which is the next best thing I think that we can get. after the dispatches programme, I was approached by the police and asked if I wanted to press charges. But again, because no one else seemed to be, you know, standing up publicly, I felt there was no way I was going to be able to stack against somebody like him. So I didn't proceed. It's very different now. It's very different. And I hope that everybody does get some kind of peace from this, apart from anything else.
Maria, what does justice look like for the survivors of this? You run Justice for Harrods survivors. What can be done for the women that come forward? Because just to put it into context, you were representing around 20 or so women since this new documentary came out. How many women are you now talking to?
Yeah, so on Thursday we had 37 clients, all who had suffered absolutely terribly. Since then, we've had a further 100 inquiries since Thursday and Friday over the weekend. So it's absolutely massive. But not only that, what's been really rewarding is that we've had inquiries from people who want to help. People saying they know somebody who can provide documents, they know somebody who can provide evidence, who can help us and help the women with this process, which is amazing. We've also been contacted by a couple of present Harrods employees, and so obviously we still need to investigate what they want to talk to us about, but that's very interesting as well.
Yeah, because uncovering the scale of this relies on victims coming forward and telling their stories and feeling brave enough to do that. And Cheska, as you said, when Mohamed al Fayed was alive, and in this documentary it goes into that, women were frightened too because of, you know, what was said to them at the time. Today, Harrods have released an updated statement. Now, Harrods have a settlement process. Harrods is no longer owned by al Fayed family or anything to do with his estate. There are new owners, and they say that there's a settlement process set up for victims. It was designed in consultation with independent external counsel. This is the statement from Harrods today, and experts in personal injury litigation. All claims settled today and moving forwards will be based on the guidance of these external individuals to ensure swift and impartial outcomes for the victims. They talk about due diligence, which of course buyers will do when they take on a company. And they've said as part of our due diligence, there is an ongoing internal review supported by external counsel, including looking at whether any current staff were involved in any of the allegations, either directly or indirectly. Now, that's an update tonight, Maria. You've gone over this.
I have.
What have you made of it?
So I'm very surprised at how scant it is when you consider the horror of the allegations that have came out in the documentary and everything that was heard at the press conference on Friday, that they have provided an updated press statement, which is 2 very brief and vague paragraphs. And I say it's very vague and it's very weak for the following reasons. So it talks about the settlement process and how it was done in consultation with independent external counsel, with expertise in personal injury litigation. Those external counsel perhaps would have been instructed by Harrods to do that. I have seen correspondence with many of the women that we represent where the correspondence that was sent to them basically said, well, this is why your claim is going to fail. This is why you will struggle to succeed in litigation, raising various arguments. Also, this correspondence and this process was based on when individual people were coming forward and perhaps not with the backdrop which we now know about the scale of this.
Well, Harrods have previously said they are utterly appalled, and they have provided this update. Cheska, what do you want to say to other women who will be watching all of this unfold? And as Maria said, you know, people are coming forward all the time, and they will take their time to make the decision as to whether they want to come forward privately or publicly. What would you say to any women watching this and have been affected by this?
I think if you have the strength to come forward, then do. The support is now there. As Maria says, there's a lot of us in this situation. There's a great support network building. But by no means should anybody feel pushed into doing something that they don't feel comfortable with. It's a lot for people for these women to deal with. You know, it was a systemic fear that was drilled in as well. You know, and that lives with you for a long time.
Because
that's not an easy thing.
Afterwards to you, because you only worked there for a week, it's worth actually reminding people who haven't seen the documentary yet what actually happened to you with Mohamed al Fayed.
I was sent a letter completely out of the blue, saying that they'd heard I was interested in a career with them. It was nothing that I had instigated. Anyway, I went along for the interview, was asked if I'd ever worked in an office before. Mohamed al Fayed came into the interview, asked me if I knew who he was, and I said no. And I was told there and then that I'd got the job as his junior personal assistant. And, you know, perhaps alarm bells should have been ringing, but anyway, I took the job. And it was an uncomfortable environment to work in. No one really spoke to me when I was there. I wasn't given any instruction on the job. But I was told after the second day that I was to go for a medical, which turned out to be a very thorough internal medical as well, which I never received the results for. Nothing to the office and nothing to home. I assume these results were clear because it wasn't that long afterwards that Mohamed al Fayed made a move. I wanted to be an aspiring actress, and I told him this, and he said, well, you must, after one of your late shifts, stay in the apartments at Park Lane and then come up and we'll get a portfolio together and I'll pass it on to Dodi, his son, obviously, who was a successful film producer at the time. He'd done Hook, he'd done Chariots of Fire and all sorts. And I thought this was great. And so I said yes, and I stayed at the apartment waiting to be called up. I was brought up and I was given a script to read from, which was apparently from the prequel that Dodi was making about Peter Pan. And then he said, right, well, you need to put this on. And he produced a swimming costume. And I said, well, it's fine, I'm wearing leggings, I've got a T-shirt on under my jumper. Surely that will do. And he said, no, I need to see your shape. Go and put this on. And I went into his bathroom feeling extremely frightened at this stage.
Just to remind people, you were 19 at the time.
I was 19. And I was convinced at this stage there were cameras, there could have been anybody hiding anywhere. I didn't know, your imagination runs wild. As it was, my imagination wasn't wild because what I was feeling was right. I changed into this wretched swimming costume in the shower underneath all my clothes so as not to reveal anything. Came out and the camera was set up in his bedroom. And I'm standing there in a swimming costume facing this camera and I'm told to read the lines that Wendy was saying to Peter Pan about Neverland, and it reads, take me, please, which in context, I guess, is fine, but standing in a swimming costume facing a camera is not. And he came round from behind the camera and grabbed my arms and kissed me. And I pushed him off and sort of said, you know, what are you doing? This is unacceptable. You're married. You know, that still does mean something to me. And he said, oh, it doesn't matter. She doesn't need to know, she doesn't need to find out. And I realised I needed to get out of there without antagonising him. And he said, you know, I cannot help you with your acting career unless you sleep with me. So that was my option.
And you left soon
I got out of there.
Yeah, you got out of that Park Lane apartment.
Yep.
And you left Harrods.
I never went back. But I never got contacted by Harrods to find out where I was. Why hadn't I shown up for work? Nothing. I got my pay slip eventually, but that was it.
Maria, Cheska's story is one of so many that you have heard from so many women that have come forward. And Mohamed al Fayed, as I said, is dead. He can't answer to anything you've said. If he were to be found guilty, he wouldn't be punished. But in terms of what happens now, he didn't do this on his own. He might have been alone in that apartment that night, but he was part of a big organisation. He had people around him. There were doctors carrying out these examinations. In terms of accountability, should people that were involved in this, allegedly, be worried?
Absolutely, and there were many others involved, from high up in the company down to different positions in the company. So when people focus entirely on Mohamed al Fayed, yes, he perpetrated those offences, but it was also heavily tangled within the business as well. And that's why Harrods have to provide a proper explanation. Now, everybody needs to understand, yes, there's new owners in place, but liabilities...
You want transparency.
Liabilities still stay with the company. And this statement, and I'm sorry to go back to this statement, but I find it so infuriating that after all the horrors we've heard, that we have these two small paragraphs. Their emphasis is on a
This is just the update. There has been a more robust statement, a more forceful statement.
Their emphasis in this update is on a swift process. Well, are the women going to have independent psychiatric reports on their conditions as part of that swift process? For many women, it's been life-changing. Absolutely.
Experienced.
Are they going to get reports that look at their loss of opportunity on the labour market and how their careers have been absolutely devastated by this man? And this updated statement raises more questions. What did Harrods know and when? What did they know when they purchased the company? What did they know about the 15-year-old who made an allegation of sexual assault in 2007? What did they know after Cheska had the bravery to appear on dispatches? Did they all just ignore that at Harrods? Or could that have been an opportunity where they could have taken action to find out if there was a systemic problem within the business?
OK. Well, Maria and Cheska, thank you so much for your time this evening. There is more to come on this. And as you've said, you know, there's no time limit for women to come forward, not just with relation to this, but any kind of behaviour they face like this in the workplace. So thank you so much for coming in to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that news statement from Harrods did include the line saying that they'll be looking at whether any current staff are involved in any of the allegations, either directly or indirectly. But let's bring you the more robust statement I was talking about that they released a day or so ago. They said, "We are utterly appalled by the allegations of abuse perpetrated by Mohamed al Fayed. These were the actions of an individual who was intent on abusing his power wherever he operated, and we condemn them in the strongest terms. We also acknowledge that during this time his victims were failed. And for this, we sincerely apologise. We're doing everything we can to fix this. The Harrods of today is a very different organisation to the one owned and controlled by al Fayed between 1985 and 2010. It is one that seeks to put the welfare of our employees at the heart of everything we do. This is why, since new information came to light in 2023 about historic allegations of sexual abuse by al Fayed, it has been our priority to settle claims in the quickest way possible, avoiding lengthy legal proceedings for the women involved." Right, let's take you across to Tel Aviv now. We have an update for you from the Israeli Defense Forces. Let's listen in.
Hezbollah operatives were doing the opposite and acted to prevent civilian moving safety. This is because Hezbollah uses civilian population and civilian homes as a human shield for its terrorist activities. Today, we exposed this strategy, showing how Hezbollah uses civilian homes as a cover for their deadly weapons. In these images, you can see how Hezbollah hides long-range rockets with range of hundreds of kilometers inside the attic of a house in the heart of Khumin al-Takhta village in southern Lebanon. You can see here that the rocket is stored on an hydraulic system and is prepared for a launch out of an opening in the roof, directed at the communities in northern Israel. And more than that, under this attic, a family lives and serves as a human shield for Hezbollah. The IDF strikes today, we saw many secondary explosions, such as this. Behind every secondary explosions, there's a building containing deadly munitions, rockets and missiles, triggering such a reaction like you see here. It is likely that some of the casualties are from these secondary explosions. Here you can see a house used by Hezbollah to store its weapons. In the footage here, following our strike on the weapon, secondary explosions can be clearly seen, and a rocket fired and hit a nearby house. Let me be clear. Hezbollah is responsible for this situation. This is Hezbollah's plan to turn southern Lebanon into a battlefield for its attacks on Israel. We cannot accept terrorist groups storing weapons inside people's homes, using them to fire at other civilian communities. The international community must condemn Hezbollah's grave violation of international law and actions that endanger civilians on both sides of the border. The IDF makes vast efforts not to hit civilians and make every effort to mitigate harm to civilians during operational activity. Regarding the high number of casualties, everyone is a tragedy in Lebanon. Among those killed were a large number of Hezbollah terrorists who were next to the weapons that we targeted. Israel is facing threats on all fronts and continuing to act against them in defense for the people of Israel. We have many other missions to carry out. We have to bring back home all our hostages that are held in brutal conditions by Hamas. We have to bring them back home in all means. We have to continue dismantling Hamas capabilities in Gaza. And we have to bring security to every Israeli citizen in the north and in the south. Questions, please.
2 questions from AP. The first, Israel has been battling Hamas for nearly a year, and it still hasn't realized all of its goals in Gaza. Are we looking at the possibility of months of fighting in Lebanon as well? Second question is the army prepared for a ground invasion now? And if the order comes, how quickly could ground forces move in?
Israel has been battling Hamas, this is true, for a year. Yeah, Hamas did the 7th of October, a horrible massacre. It's almost a year. We have to fight and dismantle Hamas and enduring defeat to Hamas. There is no other way. To make sure there is security in our borders and to bring back home all our hostages in all means. In the same time, the world should remember, on the 8th of October, Hezbollah started a war. Israel did not attack Lebanon, did not attack Hezbollah. It's Hezbollah on the 8th of October started firing on Israeli civilians in the northern border, and he's been doing this for over 11 months with 9,000 rockets, and 60,000 Israelis have left their homes. We have to act to stop the threat of Hezbollah. Hezbollah was planning to do a larger scale of massacre than the 7th of October in the northern Israel. And we will have to make sure that in any one of our borders we are safe and there is no threat of a 7th of October in any one of our borders, never again. Is the army prepared? Yes, the army is in full readiness, and we will do whatever is necessary to bring back home all our citizens to the northern border safely.
Question from CNN. The cabinet has declared a special situation nationwide. Rockets have been fired at Haifa today and near Tel Aviv. You've killed hundreds in Lebanon. Is Israel prepared for a third Lebanon war?
The special situation that was declared by the government allows us to do different kind of things in the home fronts. We still haven't changed the policy yet. And we are looking and observing the situation continuously all along the day, and we will do that also tomorrow. We have to make sure that we provide safety for our citizens, and we will do that also in attack and in defense as well. And then we have to say that the resilience of Israelis is what gives us a lot of power in the IDF to keep on doing attack and defense and doing all this war for many, many months. The resilience of the Israelis is strong, and we are ready to face whatever it needs for the future. And regarding the condition of the third Lebanon war, we are not looking for wars. We are looking to take down the threats. And there will not be a 7th of October threat in the northern border. It has to be a safe border where Hezbollah is pushed back from the border and there are no threats like missiles, rockets, UAV threatening our communities, our citizens. This is our mission, and we will do whatever is necessary to do to achieve this mission. We hope to do it as shortly as we can.
ABC News. Is what we've seen today the beginning of an all-out war in Lebanon? How do you think the coming days will look like for the IDF and for civilians of Israel and Lebanon?
We've been facing in the north for over 11 months for our citizens. Every day looks with rockets on their heads going to bomb shelters. Those are citizens that for over 11 months are suffering. And we are acting to change this reality. This is what we're doing now, and we will use all the measures we need to do that. And it is Hezbollah who started it on the 8th of October. It is Hezbollah and the Radwan forces that were preparing to do a 7th of October in the northern Israel. And our mission is to create the security and the conditions for the northern citizens of Israel to go back safely to their homes, and we will do whatever it needs to achieve this goal.
AFP, you said this morning that the threat Hezbollah poses needs to be degraded and its infrastructure needs to be dismantled. Can you please be more specific about what the specific goals of these strikes are, and do you anticipate that they will be followed by ground operations?
Hezbollah holds two big capabilities. One of it is the arms and weapons that we saw that were located today in civilian homes using Lebanese civilians as human shield. This threat allows Hezbollah to make southern Lebanon, who was supposed to be secure by 1701, the resolution, it was supposed to be secure, but it's not. It has deadly arms, as we have seen today with secondary explosions and the evidence I showed you today. We have to make sure that Hezbollah is away from the border, far away, with no capabilities that are risking our citizens. At the same time, no Radwan forces, none, next to a border with no infrastructure and no capabilities. We showed today an aerial campaign. It is currently now an aerial campaign. This is what we did. And we will do whatever we need in the next stages in order to prevent the threat of Hezbollah, secure the border, and create the conditions for the return safely for the citizens of northern Israel.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Daniel Hagari there providing the update from Tel Aviv. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes was listening in and joins me now live from Jerusalem. Deborah, your reaction to that?
But it's important to really set out what's happening. This is almost a week on now from those extraordinary booby-trap bombs of pagers and walkie-talkies that devastated Hezbollah's ranks and also many civilians in Lebanon, triggering this follow-up. Israel was blamed for those attacks. It's not confirmed nor denied it was behind them, but everyone suspects that was the case. Following on from that, you've had this series of increasing airstrikes by the Israeli military, and today has been the heaviest bombardments inside Lebanon since, as we were just hearing then, the 8th of October, when Hezbollah started launching these escalating strikes across the border into northern Israel. The military spokesperson there is very carefully trying to explain to the world, which is watching in horror at the scenes of thousands of civilians in Lebanon fleeing away from that border, also the mounting death toll and the numbers of injuries, He was trying to explain why the military is acting, accusing Hezbollah of placing these munitions, these rocket launchers, inside civilian neighbourhoods. The Israeli military earlier today sent out warnings over text messages to people inside Lebanon to move away from areas where there was known to be Hezbollah arsenals of weapons. The reason why, of course, the subsequent airstrikes, but clearly civilians are in the firing line and are being caught up in this too. But from the Israeli perspective, they say they have no choice. They say they are under fire from Hezbollah. They have been since almost a year now, and their people have had to move from their side of the border too, and clearly underlining the goal to enable Israeli civilians to return to that border, and crucially not ruling out, he didn't rule out the possibility of these airstrikes being followed up by a ground invasion into Lebanon.
Deborah, thank you. Deborah Haynes there with the update from Jerusalem. Thank you. We'll continue to follow that story here on Sky News throughout the evening, but we'll focus on events a little closer to home here in the UK. More than 20 flood warnings remain in place tonight across central and southern England after some areas of the country saw a month's worth of rain in 24 hours. In Bedfordshire, some homes have been inundated. Shimon from Power reports from Leighton Buzzard.
A weekend of heavy rain, hail and thunderstorms has led to this, a sure sign that summer is officially over. In Bedfordshire, some schools were forced to close, and many residents took time off work to assess damage done to properties overnight. Like Cheryl, who says the sandbags provided didn't stand a chance against the heavy downpour, and she has no idea how costs will be covered.
We have found out that there's a clause in our insurance that doesn't cover us for flood, so we're not insured. I don't even want to think about it, to be honest with you, because I don't know what we're going to... If it needs replacing, what needs replacing, haven't got that far yet, and how much it's going to cost us.
Just a few minutes up the road and flooding has turned roads into rivers. Sunil has lived in this area for more than a decade and says the situation is unprecedented but entirely preventable.
I'm not angry, I'm stupefied at the inability to actually look at cost-effective solutions. We're not saying do an expensive job, do a job which is worth doing.
Bedfordshire is just one of the counties hit hard by the rain, leading to some parts being submerged underwater. It comes as some parts of the country saw more than a month's worth of rain in just one day. In Warwickshire, even cattle were forced to wade through water, and many towns through Oxfordshire were brought to a standstill. Some tried to go about their days, but floodwater closed roads and caused transport chaos in the home counties. In London, football games were suspended as floods destroyed parts of a pitch, creating a sinkhole. But emergency services say they're most concerned about those in rural areas being cut off completely, with conditions on the road becoming difficult and extremely dangerous. And whilst the clean-up starts for those already hit hard, others brace themselves for the damage that could come as more wet weather is ahead. Shimon Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Well, in Shimon's report there, you saw the astonishing pictures of what the weather has done to AFC Wimbledon's pitch. We're joined now by former board member at the club, Graham Stacey. He set up a Just Giving page today to raise money to help the club with repairs. Graham, good of you to join us tonight. Perhaps you could talk us through those images. They are so dramatic. What do we understand about what's happened to the pitch?
Oh, it's devastating, isn't it? It's thank you for having me. It was the rain overnight. It's just it's devastated the pitch and damaged the stadium as of this morning. This in a week where we have 3 home games. We seem to have gone from the crazy gang to some sort of crazy golf course. It's being assessed. It's been assessed all day by members of the club. They've been working in their wellies, pretty much flat out. And it's a case of when can we get games on now? And, you know, it takes, I'm told, about 6 weeks to seed a pitch over the summer in ideal conditions. And this is far from ideal conditions. So we've already had to postpone a game against Newcastle tomorrow night, our big cup game. We've announced that there's basically no chance of having a game on Saturday. We've rearranged a game for next October the 1st, next Tuesday. And I don't know when we'll be able to play another game at home at the moment. Nobody does.
Yeah, it's pretty devastating, isn't it? I mean, the cup tie, how much the fans were looking forward to that, having Newcastle come to your stadium. I understand that's now been rearranged to play at St James's Park. But of course, you know, that's without the reach of some fans travelling all the way up to Newcastle next week. In terms of the money you're trying to raise, I mean, it's hard to estimate a cost attached to all of this because, you know, we're looking there at the exterior of the stadium. Inside is flooding as well. Club shop, offices.
That's right. There's standing water inside. Our merchandise, I believe it's all on racks. So it's the larger sizes that go down to the floor that have been damaged, but most of that's okay. We have a museum which is on the ground floor, which is, you know, full of unique, priceless items. So we're very much hoping they're intact. With regards to the fundraising, we don't know how much we're going to need because it's a case, it's being assessed, as I say, all day, pretty much flat out. We started off this morning, sort of, you know, after the school run, before work, it was, right, what do? Let's get together. Because that's what Wimbledon fans do. In the face of adversity, we get together and we tackle it head on. And we just came up with a nominal figure, which would help the club out, you know, whether it's to hire a water pump or to get someone in to look at things, you know. So we came up with 10,000. And since being on air, we've surpassed 11,000. pounds. So we're actually putting the target up because I've been told by the club it's all going to help at the moment.
Yeah. Just taking a look at it, to the untrained eye, I know nothing about groundwork, but that's going to be costly. And it's not just Wimbledon fans that have been donated. They're football families coming together. You've had donations from all different kind of clubs.
That's right. Newcastle, Brighton, Arsenal, Colchester, Southampton. We've had support from people like Jeff Norcott, the country's finest Wimbledon sporting comedian, author John Green, author of The Fault in Our Stars. Former players have donated. Our former left-back donated £200, and then our other former left-back donated £201 just to outdo him. And it's a real football family thing. Wimbledon, I like to think, is more than a football club. We have Don's Local Action Group, which has supplied 6 million meals to the local area since 2020. AFC Wimbledon Foundation charity, which does great things locally for inclusivity across the age groups. So I like to think we're more than just a football team. It's amazing how many people from, as you say, the football community have come together and rallied around us. It's much.
Yeah. Well, as you said, AFC Wimbledon does such a lot for the community coming together for the club. Graham Stacey, former board member at AFC Wimbledon, and big supporter, big fundraiser. Thank you, and we'll follow the progress of the club with some degree of interest, it has to be said. Thank you so much, Graham. Really appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Still to come here on the programme, I'm going to speak to a former Team GB rower who was forced to retire because of long COVID. Now, millions of people in England can book flu and COVID vaccines from today, with over 65s, those in care homes and frontline social care staff among those eligible for free jabs. But as the NHS rolls out its winter vaccination programme, there are calls for the health service to do more to support those suffering from long COVID. Now, according to the latest figures from the Office for National Statistics, which cover the period from November 2023 to March 2024, around 2 million people in England and Scotland say they are experiencing long COVID. Of those 2 million, around 1.5 million people, or 3/4, felt that their day-to-day activities were affected, while 381,000 people, around a fifth, said their ability to undertake such activities had been limited a lot. And I'm joined now in the studio by former Team GB rower Una Cousins, who was forced to retire because of long COVID. Una, thank you so much for coming in to talk to us about this.
Thank you very much for having me on.
You had dreams of going to the Paris Olympics, potentially Los Angeles, and that was stopped in its tracks because of long COVID. Talk to me about how it's impacted you.
Yeah, so I'm a former professional athlete of the British rowing team. I was pre-selected for the Tokyo Olympics in March 2020, but unfortunately at that time I also contracted COVID-19, which developed into pretty bad long COVID. And over the last 4 years I've experienced debilitating symptoms that have not only stopped me from rowing, but also have stopped me from living any sort of normal life. I'm fortunate enough that I have made some recovery now, and I'm working part-time at Oxford University doing social science research into long COVID, and I'm also part of the There for ME campaign team. But yeah, recovery is slow, and I'm not there yet. And I'd also highlight that despite the fact that long COVID has taken away my rowing career, I'm definitely one of the lucky ones. As you mentioned, there's nearly 400,000 people who are experiencing debilitating, life-altering symptoms. And at the severe end, people, I know people who are confined to their beds in darkened rooms, unable to tolerate light or sound. They can't even hug their loved ones, and these people are not getting better. And in some cases, people are dying.
Una, what's the level of frustration you feel about the research and funding into long COVID? Because I know you're now involved in this area, and considering nearly 2 million people in the UK are affected, the ones that we know about, it's startling how little research and funding there is.
Yeah, basically, the pandemic has exposed a massive blind spot in science and medicine, and there are similarities to the disease ME, and the diseases are different, but there's a lot of overlap in symptoms and possibly biological mechanisms too. And if you look back in history, there's many diseases that were psychologized, attributed to hysteria, and then biomedical research happened, and we understood the biological underpinnings and treatments and tests and cures were found. Doctors were trained in this, and then that led to better delivery of care and better health outcomes. But what's happened with ME and then long COVID is that it's still being attributed to psychological causes. So we don't have good biomedical research, we don't have treatments, we don't have cure, and then we don't have a cure. And then the pandemic has come along, and we now have so many people with this disease who are just not getting better, and they need biomedical research, they need treatment in order to get their lives back.
You are part of the There for ME campaign that has been launched to raise awareness of this and understanding, because for so long, ME, the attitude towards ME hasn't been good. And for a lot of the reasons you talked about in terms of medical professionals don't quite know what to do about it because of the lack of research into it and the lack of treatment.
Yeah, for decades there's been this kind of competing hypothesis that it was had a psychological basis. That's been thoroughly debunked. Like, we know that's not true. The NICE guidelines were updated in 2021, but there's a whole generation of doctors who have been trained on this theory, basically, and it's been an obstructive influence to biomedical research happening. And so what we really need is biomedical research so that we can have tests, treatments and cures, and then train the doctors on the new biomedical research to enable them to provide appropriate care and to have better health outcomes for all of these people who are so unwell.
Because do you find that the historic attitude towards ME is also being shown towards those with long COVID?
Yeah, I think it's slightly better, because it was kind of undeniable that you know, this virus was going around, lots of people catching this virus. It was more undeniable that these people had, there was a physical cause to the disease, but it is very mixed. There are people who go to the doctors and it's attributed to psychological causes. You know, when this virus is coming, in the ME world, they were the first people to say there's a wave of disability coming, and these people will be told that there's nothing we can do for you, and they will be attributed, their symptoms will be attributed to psychological causes. The ME people, they knew that this was going to happen. So, yeah, I do think the response to long COVID is built on the foundations of our lack of understanding of ME.
OK. Una, really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming in to talk about this issue and highlight what is or not being done currently. I know you're part of a team trying to do what they can for all of those suffering from long COVID, living with long COVID. Really appreciate your time, Una. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Still to come. Why Northern Rail has banned dating apps on their trains. And we'll be asking, is this the future for Manchester United? We hear why plans for a regeneration project at Old Trafford could result in a new stadium.
Mayhem in the Middle East, rippling in America's West.
Get back! Get back!
The resolve of these protesters is now being seriously tested. I saw police being forced or pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests.
None of this is a peaceful protest.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. How are you feeling?
I am angry. It is an anti-woman agenda.
Sky News, get the full story first. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support, but it's nasty out there.
Can you beat Donald Trump, Governor? President Biden, do you trust President Xi? President Biden says that this meeting went well. He said real progress was made on a whole host of issues. Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
There's no doubt that Kamala Harris and her team are harnessing the power of social media. Do you think Kamala is brat?
Kamala's brat.
Are you scared?
Yeah, we were scared. It was terrible. Strong wind, building tearing down.
As them say, our God works, so we can't do nothing.
The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. Free, wherever you get your news.
Excited. I've had severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolution. It's our job to try to make sense of it all.
Let's just bring you some breaking news. We're getting this from Greater Manchester Police. An investigation has been launched in Salford after 2 bodies have been found in South Radford Street at a property there. A 40-year-old woman and an 8-year-old girl have been found. All known next of kin have been informed. And Greater Manchester Police say they are not actively looking for anyone else in relation to this investigation. So that is a 40-year-old woman and an 8-year-old girl sadly found dead at a property in Greater Manchester this evening. Right, let's take you through the sport. David is here. Hello, David.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about Everton potentially getting new owners. And I feel like this has been talked about for years.
I think we've had this conversation several times,
Yeah, why is this different now?
OK, so there are 2 kind of main characters in this story at present. Dan Friedkin, then John Textor, and then Dan Friedkin again. Because Dan Friedkin, he's behind the Friedkin Group, who own Roma, he was interested in buying the club. They got close a while back, then pulled out because of concern over loans that the club had made with other investors. Then John Textor came in. John Textor owns 45% of Crystal Palace. He was very, very close. In fact, over the weekend, he was still the bookies' favourite to take over. And he in fact, you know, was so positive about it. He sort of described taking over Everton as becoming president of the United States. This is what it meant to him. However, it doesn't look like he's going to get his way because now Dan Friedkin is back in the game with the Friedkin Group. And now they have seemed to have kind of resolved any issues they had over loans to creditors, etc. They've kind of... The deal that is on the table for Everton is one that really interests Farhad Moshiri, who owns 94.1% of the club, and he is due to sell this stake to the Friedkin Group, paying off the loans, turning their own loans to equity. And so this is basically as close as you could possibly get to the story having the happy ending that the Everton fans want it to have. So you know, Dan Friedkin, then John Textor, then Dan Friedkin, and it looks like it might stay that way.
Yeah, I think I know where we are now. So what is the next step? When does this story officially get its happily ever after?
Yeah, OK.
As much as you can in sport, of course.
Yeah, OK. So they need approval from the Financial Conduct Authority, the Football Association. They've got to pass the Premier League's owners and directors test as well. These are not insignificant hurdles, but they should be resolved relatively easily. Obviously, Everton moving to a new stadium at the end of the season. They will hope that that all progresses well and that their form picks up on the pitch. They've taken 1 from the first 15 points on offer. So, yes, positive news that Everton fans have been craving for a long, long time. So let's see how that progresses over the coming days. Plenty more making the headlines in sport this evening.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
We were both so excited to see each other as these little characters in a kid's book. It was brilliant, and we spent a lot of time laughing about doing it. You know, the book is 2 young lads, Kevin, Rob, exploring what heroes mean to them, and to have something that's physical that we completed together, and for it to be the last thing we did, which is such a positive thing as well, is great. And I know little Jackson Burrow, who's 5, has had this book read to him about 100 times and loves it.
Can you try and elaborate a little bit on your relationship and why that bond was so special? We
sat next to each other for 15 years in dressing rooms. You know, Rob was maybe 18 and I was 20, and both trying to make our way. Probably 300 days a year we sat in that dressing room and we chatted of some sort every day, albeit very, very different with Rob because he's crackers and he was crackers. I was there right at the start when Rob was diagnosed, and I think you have a choice to make as a friend. You're either going to be there with somebody or you're not, and it was a really easy decision for me and many of our teammates, I must say, to be there for him. You learn a lot about the M&D community when a friend's diagnosed, and it became apparent really early that people, when they're diagnosed...
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Now, for many singletons across the UK, the daily commute might seem like the ideal time to swipe right in the hope of finding a suitable partner. But now, one of the UK's largest rail operators has banned passengers from using dating apps on their Wi-Fi. Northern Rail says it's to protect children on board from seeing inappropriate content. But is a ban really necessary? Let's speak to dating expert and host of the Sex Talks podcast, Emma Louise Boynton. Emma, what have you made of this?
I mean, this is totally and utterly farcical. They have lumped dating apps in with porn, with kind of gambling apps. And they're just totally incomparable. It feels kind of oddly draconian and quite kind of puritanical. And as someone who is on the front line of digital dating, I will tell you, it is hard and it is time consuming, and train delays can provide the perfect opportunity to get to swiping. So I just feel we shouldn't be deprived of that opportunity.
What are they worried about children seeing on there?
Well, this is the really odd thing, because I think Matt Rice, who's the Chief Operating Officer at Northern Railway, said that while some people can exercise appropriate moderation when it comes to what they're doing on these dating apps, other people cannot. And I would just like to say to Matt Rice, people are exchanging what I'm sure some would deem as inappropriate content across all social media platforms, on email. I mean, if that's really the impetus for making this ban, then they're going to need to ban basically every form of social communication, WhatsApp included, and that would just seem, I mean, that's ridiculous.
And commuting seems like you said, it's a good time to dedicate some time to that, because I've got some single friends who say, you know, using these dating apps, it's not frivolous. It can be a full-time job if you're trying to find the one. And it seems a bit like they're demonising daters. And don't people often find love on a commute? I'm sure there was something in the metro about missed connections or people you saw on the rush hour that you fancied and you put in a note in the local paper. That's just the updated version of that, isn't it?
Yes, totally. This is the modern version. This is the meet cute in the digital era, is via dating app. And I think to your point there, I think that there often feels like we have quite a kind of punishing attitude towards singletons. We have a single tax. If you're single, you end up paying higher bills. You pay for kind of full hotel rooms. You're on holiday. Weddings are very expensive if you are single. And I just think it feels like quite kind of another kind of punitive approach to people who are single. And I just think let people search for love however they want to. And in a digital era, apps are where a lot of people are meeting their partners. And as you said, it's, a commute is a perfect time to do a lot of very efficient, fast swiping. So if they really want to help people in their search for love, as they say they're encouraging people to do, I think faster Wi-Fi so that we can swipe.
Emma Louise, you make a good point. If you can get on the train Wi-Fi, that's a good point. Exactly. Emma Louise, thank you.
Pleasure.